Hello and welcome to my channel. Thank you for watching, thank you for joining, and we are in this series of videos in this library. I'm following this learning path to learn OpenUSD, at least the basics, and prepare for the certification. In the first video, we went through the module 1, and today we are going through the module 2. Okay, as a reminder, we have 9 modules here and then a few courses. So let's jump directly to the module 2. Okay, so let's jump into the action. Here is the first overview about what we are going to be seeing in this second module. The first thing is that we will learn about the two types of schemas that define a prim. Then we will see how to organize our state in scopes and xforms. And we will learn how to use this xform common API, and we will use a specific kind of schema related to lighting. So let's go to schemas. So let's see the two types of schemas that we have. First one is a schemas, and this means literally this is something. This is the first purpose of our prim. And then we have API schemas, which will be like add-ons to our prim. To give you a live example, is schemas will be like saying, okay, this is a car, this prim is a car. And API schemas is like saying, okay, this car has automatic transmission or has manual transmission. Okay, that will be the API schemas. But basically between both of them, we are defining a prim. So it's a schema is the first purpose of the prim. API schemas is the any extra information that we are giving to this prim. And then through Python, here we have a few methods on how to get information about the schema of our prim. And for example, in this kind of is a schema, they use the geom sphere. Here we are defining, this is the schema. So we are telling this prim here is going to be a sphere. And that sphere, the minimum, one of the minimum attributes that we have is the radius of the sphere. So we have to set the radius of this sphere. By default will be 1, but here we are setting it to 10. But basically this is a kind of ISA schema. Here we have USD looks, it's another schema. Basically here we are telling, okay, this prim here is a disk light. It's a light of type disk. And here we are getting all the attributes of the schema, and we are setting the intensity, sorry. And API schema, for example, adding a physics rigid body will be an API, and you will understand that this is an API schema because all API schemas end with the word API. Okay, so that's easy to see it. You see here, for example, we are adding rigid body to this prim, to our cube prim. And as you can see, we are ending the word with API because it's an API schema. Sorry if I'm repeating myself a lot. And we are getting here the kinematics attributes, and we are adding some, because we are adding some physics, now we can set up this attribute. And let's see it in our ISACSIM application. So here I'm in my Omniverse application. This is ISACSIM, but you can do the same with USD Composer or any other kit application. And I have already opened my script editor, but you can find it here. And you can open a new stage, empty. So in the stage, you will have only the world Xform. As you can see, this is a schema of type Xform. So we have transform properties. And let's go back to the documentation. I'm going to copy this to test the sphere. Paste. If you run this, you will have an error because state is not defined. So we need to define state. And I'm going just to copy paste. And to do this, I need to import this library as well. So now basically we are defining the state as it's very sensible, the control V here. So now we are defining the state as the state that we are seeing here in the viewport. So getting context, we're getting this state from here. I'm going to clear this. As you can see in the stage, we don't have anything. Now I run. And now in the stage, we have a sphere as a child of world. And you can see here that the sphere has a radius of 10. If you want to visualize the sphere, select, click F. And if you want to see it, let's select Gray Studio. And here we have our sphere. Anyway, let's jump to the next lesson because we have plenty of exercises. So the next lesson is about scopes. Scopes are like folders in your PC. So these are for you to organize your prims in your stage. They don't have any properties. They are just empty spaces to organize your project. And this is the first exercise. Let's copy the code and go back to Omniverse. Let's create a new tab. I'm going to clear this. So what's happening here? First, this is the folder where we are going to be creating this file, but this folder will be creating wherever you have Isaacsim installed or USD Composer if you are using USD Composer or any other kit application. So here we are creating the stage. Here in Python, this is the name of the variable, which is of the type Xform, and we are defining in the stage this variable with the name of world. Could be any name, doesn't have to be world. And we are setting this prim as the default prim in our file, in our stage. We will learn later on what that means, a default prim, but for now just keep a mental note that every file has a default prim. And here we are defining the scope, the folder. We save it in this variable in Python, and we are naming this folder geometry. And as a child of this folder, we are creating a cube with the name cube. Could be any name, doesn't have to be cube, okay? And then we are saving the stage. Let's run it. Okay. What's the fault here? The cube is not defined, but we are creating cube now. Let me check the code in VS Code because I did it a few days ago. Uh, let's compare. It's the same. Oh, I don't know what's the difference between this and this. You tell me you see any difference between these two pieces of code, but I don't know. Might have been missing some symbol. Anyway, this is working fine, and you have in my GitHub, in my repository, you have the code here. Okay, so I just copy paste from here instead from the documentation, and we have created the file here, as you can see. If I open it, save this. Here we have the cube, and as you can see, as a child is the scope, the folder, and as a child we have the prim of type cube. So that's it for the first exercise. I don't know why this is not working. I don't know the difference between this and my code, but I'm not going to waste a minute on that. You tell me if you see the difference. And let's go for the next lesson about Xforms. Okay, so Xforms, which means literally transforms, is a schema prim that is used to identify your prim in your 3D scene, where it is, what its orientation, so rotation, and the scale. Here we have a few methods on how to work with Xforms, and here we have an example. But I'm going to work directly in the Omniverse application. So here, by default, you have a world. This is a default prim, and this is already an Xform. As you can see, we can create another Xform as a child. Let's create a cube. Let's see it. Now we can set this cube as a child for this Xform. Something important that you need to know is that a mesh or shape can be childs of Xforms, and an Xform can be a child of another Xform, but a mesh cannot be a child of another mesh. Okay. Now, anything you do with your parent Xform will happen to the childs. So if I scale here, I'm scaling everything. If I move it, I move it. And you can see the original transform of the meshes remains the same. If I move the child, it doesn't happen anything to the parent, okay? And the exercise is just creating this new file. We are defining the world like the one that we have here. So this is by default here. And then you can see in the JSON-like format the definition of the world as an X form. Now let's see how to use the XForm Common API. So XForm Common API is a helper for us to manipulate this transformation from an XForm. Basically, to make an analogy, it's like if you have a TV and the TV has the buttons to change channels on the back of the TV, but the XForm Common API will be your wireless control, so you can manipulate the channels from your sofa. That's a, a word example, but something like that. Here we have an example, and here we have another one. Well, in this example, you notice that we are checking if XForm Common API is compatible with this prim here. That's because to be able to use XForm Common API, the prim XForm transformation need to be set as this format, which is the standard format. If you have created an XForm from USD geom, you will be fine, but could be that you are importing the asset from another 3D software and use different format, then will not be compatible. So then here we are setting translation, rotation. We need to specify the order of the rotation because it's not the same rotating in X, Y, Z than rotating in Z, Y, X. It's not the same result. So we specify the order. In this example, okay, we are creating this file. We are creating the state. We are creating a cone and a cube. We are changing the color of the cone. Then we are saving here the XForm Common API. And we are setting the scale and translation. And you will get something like that. Okay, let's run this example because there is something I want to show you. Fill new empty. Okay. If I run this, I have created that. Open. You see the cone is not in the same position as here. Why? Because by default, anything that we create here has the Z axis as the up axis, but in our scene here, in our Omniverse application, we have Y. We can change this, or we can change it in the cube as well, in the cone from here. You see? We can set this property as well when we are creating the cone, and we will see that in another lesson. But yeah, that's it. So we have this and the final lesson about lights, how to set lights in our scene. So here you have a few types of prim lights that we have in USD by default. So this is what you can find here. Okay, these types of lights. And here you have a few methods. As you know, in the description of the video, I will leave my GitHub repository where you can find, not this file here. We have all the methods that I'm using through this tutorial. Okay, here we have an example to set up a distant light. I already ran this code before, so I think it should be already created. Let me find that one. So if you run the code here, copy, you will generate this USD file, which is that one here. I'm going to open it. And then we are defining a world XForm. We are defining two scopes, one with a cube and another one with a distant light. Because it's a distant light, like a sun, you can see the lines of where it is coming from. If you don't see the point there, it's because it is there. This is a warm white distant light. And you can see the face of the cube with illumination. You need to set up this as stage light to be able to see it. You can set lights off. Even if you set Gray Studio, you will not see the distant light. So you need to choose stage light if you want to see the effect of your light. Let's see another example. Example 2. I'm going to copy here. Let's first see what we are going to do here. So we are creating a new file, light props USDA, with another scope, geometry, with a cube as a child, then another scope for light, two children, sun and sphere light. So the first one is another distant light like before, and one sphere light. Then here we are modifying the color of the distant light as a red, and also setting up the intensity. Here we are checking if which light is this one? Checking if the distant light is compatible with XForm Common API. This is a good practice every time that you are using XForm Common API, just to raise an exception, check for errors. We are making some rotation, so we have like a 45 angle from the sun, and here we are modifying the color of the sphere light to blue, a lot of intensity, again checking for compatibility with XForm Common API, and here we are setting up the position. I'm going to run this. Asset, what is it? Going to change the name. I don't know. Okay, So in the stage, you can see now we don't have a world default prim. So we don't have any default prim here. Here's the box, and the sphere is here, setting the blue light, and the sun is coming somewhere there, coming from the bottom. And if I move a little bit, you will see the red light there. Okay, so that was the example for light. Let's see if there is anything else. You can see here that we are not defining an X form as a parent, a world X form as a parent, and we don't have a default prim. We don't have even X forms here. But we were able to set up some transformation using the XForm Common API. So that was it for this lesson. We'll see you the next time for this module 3. For now, easy peasy. See you in the next one, and thank you for watching. I hope it was helpful for yourself. Bye bye.